Hey, welcome back. See if you recognize yourself in this scenario. I can't afford an airplane. It's just too heavy a lift. It's beyond my capacity. I'll bet you thought that same thing at one time about buying a car. And eventually you solved that problem. You probably did buy a car, and the odds are it wasn't a Bentley. Let me give you a little backstory here. In 1964, my dad bought a brand new Volkswagen Bug Beetle in Germany and had it shipped back to the States. 1964. Because of the exchange rate back then, that car cost him $400 total. Really affordable, and I still have the license plate to that car as it rolled out of the factory 60 years ago. Because the Volkswagen Bug was an iconic vehicle. It was one that people just loved. It was one of the best-selling cars in the world for many, many years. And over the years, I've owned 5 air-cooled Volkswagen Bugs and 1 liquid-cooled Bug. They were terrific cars, not because their performance was so stellar, not because of the creature comforts, because frankly, the performance was pretty anemic. They were fairly underpowered. They didn't have air conditioning. They barely had windshield wipers, but it was a really affordable car. And for a lot of us, we could get into that car reasonably priced for just a couple $100s, even though that car was 15, 20, 30 years old, had some rust on it, and the interior was worn. It did what it was supposed to do. It started up. It got us where we were going. They were good, solid transportation, and that got us started on the path to adulthood. Later on, we saved up, we bought better cars, we got jobs that paid better, things worked out. But that first car, much like that first airplane, is a somewhat humble, modest vehicle that just fits your needs, not your ultimate aspirations. Fortunately, there are thousands and thousands of older airframes out there on the ramps and in the hangars across America that are much less expensive than new aircraft. Admittedly, many of them are somewhat ugly. The paint is faded or chipped or hand done. I recently looked at an airplane that somebody had painted with a brush. Didn't look great, but that's reflected in the purchase price. The panel isn't all glass. It's not modern. It may look fairly antiquated, but it's functional. The interior, the upholstery, it's faded. It might be torn, certainly frayed, but it works. And the great thing is all of those things can be upgraded. Just like that Volkswagen Bug, when my dad bought it in 1964, it was brand new. Those cars were so tight that you had to crack a vent window to close the doors. Just wouldn't work if you didn't give it some relief. If you drove that car into a river, it would float. And they even made commercials about that. It was a remarkable car. But by the time I got my first one, 15, 16 years later, they were pretty leaky. I mean, even when it rained, water came in sometimes, but it was still functional. Now, same thing in the airplane market. You can get a used airplane that doesn't look all that pretty, but is entirely functional. It is airworthy, or can be brought up to airworthy status relatively easy and for a reasonable cost. And whatever the failings of that airplane are, that's reflected in the purchase price. That Volkswagen Bug, while new when my dad bought it, worn when I bought it, some of us started buying those cars and upgrading them. We put in new carpeting, we put in new interiors, we put in better, bigger engines, we added stereo systems. You can do things to a vehicle you own that'll bring it up in value and in utility. So let's consider a random used aircraft that's ugly. Yeah, the paint's horrible, it's chipped and faded, it's multicolored, it's not what you want, but you could fix that if aesthetics are important to you. You could also just go with it if aesthetics aren't very important to you. That's entirely a personal choice. You can fly an airplane that's ugly and log the time just as easily as you can fly an airplane that's beautiful and log the time. That hour is still an hour, no matter what the airplane looks like from the outside. The interior may be worn and sagging and nothing to be writing home about, and you could upgrade that to a brand new leather interior, just spectacular. There are companies all around the United States that will do upholstery for cars or boats or airplanes, and you can get all of that upgraded and make it just beautiful. It doesn't make it fly any better. It doesn't make it any more utilitarian. It just makes it look better. And if that's important to you, you can do that. If it's not important to you, you can benefit from the fact that you're buying an airplane that's fairly unattractive, but it allows you to affordably build time and go on that vacation that you wanted to go on way out over the horizon without having to rent an airplane from somebody that you know nothing about. What about the instrument panel? An airplane that was built in the 50s or 60s or even the 70s has a fairly antiquated panel as it was installed at the factory. I once owned a 172N model built in 1977, had a cassette deck in the panel. I have no use for a cassette deck. But maybe you do. Maybe you want an MP3 player. Maybe you want GPS. All of that can be upgraded in the panel if you want to. Maybe you want to get rid of your vacuum pump, so you put in a couple Garmin G5s and pull that vacuum pump out, and you've improved your aircraft and you've got a little bit of glass there that helps you out. Or maybe you want to put in some glass thing like the Garmin 650 or 750 or a Dynon. You've got all kinds of options if you choose to do that. But you can fly an aircraft with a fully analog panel that's 60 years old and do just fine. It's all about what's your financial capacity and what's your aesthetic desire. You can fly an inexpensive airplane. You can own an inexpensive airplane and upgrade it as you wish, or just leave it as it is and keep it airworthy. Just like that first car, it doesn't have to be your dream vehicle. It can just be the vehicle that suits your needs right now and serves the function you need it to serve. Just like that first car got you from home to work or from home to college or whatever, this first airplane might be the thing that allows you to build time at a half or a quarter of the cost of the airplane you're renting elsewhere. And maybe you go ahead and do the paint. You put in a new upholstery. You do the interior all up. You upgrade the panel and it's fantastic. Maybe you even add performance modifications. Maybe you put on gap seals or vortex generators. The sky is literally the limit with what you want to do with that inexpensive airplane you found out on the ramp, unloved, uncared for. Maybe the plexiglass is crazing and the paint is faded and the radios are old and maybe they don't even work and there's some surface corrosion. All of that can be fixed. You can take the ugliest airplane, even if it's unairworthy, and bring it up to absolutely beautiful, modern, airworthy standards, something you can be really proud of. But you don't have to. It's a choice. So when you start thinking, I can't afford an airplane, change the way you're thinking, because at one time in your life you thought, I can't afford a car. And yeah, you could. Just like at some point in your life you were thinking, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to buy a house. But if you persist and you plan and you save and you work at it, many of us do. We do get that house. Maybe we even get a vacation place someplace. Aim high. Figure out how to go through the steps. Get a mentor, somebody who's done this before. Hire a local mechanic to go look at that ratty looking airplane and say, can I bring this up to airworthy standards for a reasonable cost? You're not the first person to have this concern. You're not the first person to think about, maybe I could do this. And you certainly won't be the first person who is successful doing it. If you want to own an airplane, if you want to own any airplane, there's probably a way for you to do it. Whether that's personal ownership or co-ownership in a flying club environment, there's a way to do this. Let us know what you think. What's your concern about buying an airplane? What's the thing that's holding you back? Because I'll bet if you actually think about it and talk about it with folks who have done this before, the obstacle you think of as a concrete wall is really just kind of a chain link fence with a rusty gate. Thanks so much for watching. Click like on the video if you would be so kind. Share this on social media because it's a message that more and more people really should hear. And of course, subscribe to the channel because we just love having more people come to the party. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.